What's up, guys? I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the DSM Cyclone intake manifold. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's a intake manifold. I think it came on the Japanese VR4 Galant. It has two intake runners on every cylinder, and under low boost or vacuum, one of the intake runners is closed to allow more velocity to pass that valve, and ultimately more velocity, more air inside of the cylinder. I've heard of an increase of 40 pounds of torque at low boost. Also, it helps you decrease your turbo lag. It helps your turbo to spool faster. So it's an awesome manifold. But I'm just here to talk to you guys about, if you're thinking about doing this upgrade, some things that you're gonna have to either figure out a method to do it, like this actuator. There's multiple methods to do it. I'm only going to talk about the wastegate actuator style, but you could use a solenoid, and there's other ways to do it, but in my opinion, this is probably the easiest. So yeah, this is kind of a preliminary step for you if you're thinking about getting your Cyclone, is to watch this video and just learn a little bit. So, like I said, each intake runner, or each cylinder essentially has two intake runners, and like I said, one of them is closed. And how it opens and closes is with this actuator. It opens and closes butterfly valves inside of one of the sets of intake runners. So right here we have the actuator itself. I have a wastegate actuator actuating, opening and closing my valves. This is, I don't know what it's called. It came off of, it's the wastegate actuator off of an S60 Volvo. It was a twin turbo car. I just went to my local junkyard and got it. This was a cool setup because a lot of guys are running the T25 actuators, and you have to just weld a tiny little bit, but I don't have a welder, and I suppose I could weld it at work, but I'd rather not. And so this was a good setup. It comes off of the Volvo, and it screws, the part that hooks on to the shaft that actuates screws on. So I didn't know what the pitch diameter, or the pitch was for the thread, so I just made it 1/4-20, and so I just drilled and tapped the piece that holds the butterfly valve actuator, and then I screwed it on and cut it. It was super easy, super simple fix. And so if you're debating on how to do it without a welder, that's a great solution. Also, I think it looks really clean, the way that the wires come up underneath it. They just come, I mean, it almost looks factory, but it's not. Another thing to think about if you're debating on getting this Cyclone manifold is, on your DSM, if you still have the stock intake manifold, your coil pack sits basically right above the intake runners. It basically builds its own housing on the intake manifold. Well, on the Cyclone, that's not really an option because of the way that these runners are designed. There's no room for the coil pack, so you got to find a place to put it. I ended up putting mine back here. I just built a really simple bracket. It's a U-shaped bracket. I drilled holes. There's factory bolts that drill into the Cyclone manifold. So I just drilled those holes out. I ended up cutting this into a U-shape. These sit into the bracket. If you take it apart, you can see they sit into it. So I ended up having to cut it like a U, drilling and tapping, a few bolts for it, and this is how it turned out. It turned out pretty good. It'll be kind of tucked away, so I wasn't too worried about it, but I still wanted to keep it as factory looking as possible, and I think it turned out halfway decent. I haven't put it in the car, so I don't know if it's going to be in the way of anything. I highly doubt it. I can't think of what would be in the way. So yeah, that's another thing to think about. Another thing to think about is if you buy a Cyclone manifold, here is a 6-bolt mounting bracket for the intake manifold, and I will be running, some people won't support their intake manifold. I am going to figure out a way to do it. I haven't figured out a solution yet. I'm going to fabricate something, but you can see that these bolts, they don't match up, right? So bottom line is you're going to have to figure out a bracket for your coil pack. You're going to have to figure out some way to support the intake manifold from the block if you choose to do that. Some people don't. I haven't solved that yet. Another thing to think about is none of the gaskets, other than the ones that are same on your intake manifold, so the one that mounts to the head and the one that mounts to the throttle body, those 2 gaskets they make, but this intake manifold comes apart into 3 different parts. And so if you take it apart to pour and polish it or clean it, as I did, you're going to have to build all your own gaskets. And it takes a lot of time because you don't want it to block your airflow at all, and so you're just sitting there cutting little bits at a time trying to make it perfect. When I was doing it, I didn't know what gasket material to use. The auto parts store by me has 3 different kinds. They have the this blue stuff. I think it's for water-based stuff, you know, like oil and antifreeze, stuff like that is what the packaging makes it sound like. There's this black stuff, which I don't really know what it's for. It says timing covers. And then there's this cork stuff. This is what I went for. The only reason I went for it is the packaging says it's good for air cleaners. That was the only thing on all of them that indicated anything to do with the air system. So I figured it hopefully is airtight. So I cut out all the gasket material. If you're wondering what this plate is, and this plate on the side, it's to seal the whole system off, because since they are homemade gaskets, something you're probably going to want to do is seal off the system and make sure that none of it leaks. So right now it's holding 30 pounds of pressure. I don't know if you can see that or if it's blocking in the light. 30 pounds of pressure, it's inside of this intake manifold. So if I open this ball valve, all that pressure is gone. So cool thing about that is now I know that my system doesn't leak. If I ever have to tear this apart again in the future, I can save these and use it. So I highly recommend, you know, testing it before you put it in. But that's up to you. Let's see. I think that's everything. Oh, I never showed you the actuator working. I guess I'll show you that too. The actuator opens right at 7 pounds. See if I can find my air hose here. There we go. So there's the actuator. Open, close, open, and it'll close faster. If I pull this out, it closes right away. So anyway, hope that helps you guys if you're thinking about getting a Cyclone manifold. Some stuff to think about, stuff you're gonna have to figure out a solution for. It's a lot of work. It's probably took me over a month of, you know, cleaning, painting, pour and polish, gaskets, making all these brackets, trying to just fabricate stuff. Painting it is a lot of work, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. Yeah, so thanks for watching, guys.